Where is he? I don't know, but he better get this thing done. Oh, he be playing games with that headset sample. You, get over there.
Nope.
Fine, you jerk. Gamdias sent over their HEBE M1 RGB for review, a 7.1 virtual surround sound gaming headset with a bass vibration feature, inline controls, and RGB. It's in the title. And as you may or may not know, Hebe is the cup bearer for the Greek gods and goddesses. Did they do that on purpose? I hope they did that on purpose. And bear those cups she does. You get a big pair of C's here. That is, C for circumaural. Each can holds a 50mm driver and considers your comfort with a padded pleather material, which feels really pillowy, as any good pair should. You've got a plastic housing, a metal headband for durability, with another padded elastic suspended band that rests on your head, sporting the Gamdias logo. On the sides, you've got some small HEBE M1 branding in gold and this big old RGB LED in the aggressive gamer-oriented aesthetic to round things off. The left ear cup houses this noodly unidirectional microphone that sounds a little something like this. It's not too shabby and doesn't leave me too much to cry about in terms of audio quality, but it does pick up keystrokes fairly easily, as well as audio from the headset itself if you've got your volume cranked. Making your way down the 2-meter rubber-coated cable, you'll find Gamdias' Smart Controller, which doesn't really do anything all that smart. It's got nice tactile buttons for toggling microphone mute, the bass vibration feature, the LEDs on the ear cups, and up and down for volume with blue LEDs to indicate status, with the exception of the microphone muting in red. Further down, you get a Velcro strap, and finally, the end of the cable sports a gold-plated USB connector. Now, before we go out to play, we should consult Mommy. The Hera software allows you to do some pretty neat things, like toggle the virtual 7.1 surround sound, set your sound stage by adjusting the room size or environment, and even change the position of the virtual speakers. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but it's an option.
You also get some additional microphone and speaker adjustment settings that are
a little wacky, but they are there if you want to sound
like a god. Or a
dinosaur. Whatever those sound like.
You've also got some pitch shifting if you ever wanted to know what kill switch engage sounded like tuned up or down, as well as a voice cancellation slider that kind of works if you've got a raid member that won't stop talking about his member. But if you've ever tried to remove audio noise before, you'll know it can add some pretty gnarly distortion. Lastly, you get some preset curves to play with, as well as the option to adjust them and create your own. My favorite is the default one, but there are some cases where I did enjoy the presets a little bit more. Strictly talking about the default sound for now, the slightly emphasized bass comes out clean, being completely free of mud, and the mids and highs, while being slightly overtaken by the bass, are still present and provide enough detail so I'd have no reason to complain. Moving on to the presets now, the bass boosted one made my head explode. And not in the good way. I found treble and vocal to be pretty okay for voice chats, though neither were my favorite for listening to music. The dance preset was actually pretty good for some electro music, and live was nice for those performances where the instruments clash and drown out the vocalist. Rock wasn't really my favorite. I felt the boost in the highs was a little too exaggerated, but it wasn't terrible either. I don't listen to soft rock because I'm not my mother, but the preset was actually decent in situations where I wanted a lot of bass and a lot of lead guitar, but less vocalist. Jazz looks like someone tripped over a seismograph, but I'm not huge on that genre, so I don't really have any useful input there. Metal is interesting in the sense that it boosts the lows, the mids, and the highs, but then all the in-between gets drowned out, so the emphasis was a little too strong in my opinion. I don't listen to a lot of rap, but with the bass reduction, a lot of the warmness of the voice is lost, so I didn't dabble in this one too much either. I did find classical pleasant for acoustic instrumentals though. Like I mentioned earlier, default is still my overall favorite, but I did use a few others under different situations. This part is entirely subjective, so you may not want to take my word for it. In the event that you pick these up, I suggest you spend a few hours jamming out and see what you like. Lastly, the bass vibration feature. The last headset I looked at that had something like this did not impress me, but this time around, consider me shaken. Shook? This thing tickled me in almost all the right ways. There is a motor and it does make a low-pitched metallic echoey sound, but it's almost inaudible unless you really go listening for it. The vibration scales to your system's volume, so the louder your sound, the more intense the boom. It reacts to all the right frequencies, but will occasionally drown out some of the higher, less pronounced sounds, like maybe footsteps or subtle movements in games. In general, I really enjoy it, so color me impressed. Speaking of color, I wasn't impressed. The Amazon page mentions the customization of lighting effects, but your customization pretty much starts and stops at on or off. Otherwise, you just get this color shift effect. I think RGB control can be implemented with a software update, but I'm not positive, and I'd have no idea if and when that actually becomes a thing. On the bright side, you can turn off the bright side. And to me, RGB on a headset is kind of not that important anyway. But the faults don't stop there. My personal biggest issue so far is that the Hera software doesn't seem to like to work on Threadripper. she kept crashing. That being said, I'm unsure how a Ryzen system would treat her, but the rest of my review was done on a 7700K system, and it worked perfectly there. Despite that, there are other things I'd like to see. Considering how often I switched EQ settings for various situations, a hotkey function or a button on the controller to switch profiles on the fly would have been great. Additionally, while you can adjust the curves, you can't currently save them, so if you switch to something else and you want your custom curve back, you'll have to set it again manually. Less about the software and more about the website, it would have been nice to see a download directly on the product page or in a support tab or something, instead of going to a dedicated downloads page, searching for the product, then downloading from there. While the microphone does sound good, it can be a little aggravating in other ways. The noodle mic is a bit stubborn, which makes pulling out a less than fantastic experience. I know what I said. The same goes for putting it back in. The fact that it's adjustable is nice, but actually getting the mic in or out can be a bit cumbersome. As for the bass boost, I enjoy it a lot, but there are a couple of things to note. Enabling it introduces a very quiet hiss that is otherwise drowned out by anything else that may be playing. You'd probably only notice if you toggled it on and off in silence. Regarding the surround sound feature, stereo worked fine. The virtual surround sound was just okay. I've heard better on different headsets in that they seem to provide higher accuracy, but these still have a bit of ambiguity. And lastly, the controller could probably afford some shielding. With bass vibration enabled and my phone near the controller, I can hear a crackling sound whenever any activity takes place on the mobile device. No issues if you separate them, but I guess that means Hebe won't be texting her girlfriends anytime soon. And something super minor, I wish this one piece on the ear cup was just a little more clean cut. It doesn't affect sound at all, but it does affect my peace of mind. Last couple of things to note, in terms of comfort, I think it feels fine. You may not agree. It's a bit heavier than what I'm used to, but not heavy enough to be an issue. The headset's design doesn't allow for ear cup tilt or swivel, so if you rest it on your shoulders, it'll feel like you're wearing a neck brace. On my head, the clamping pressure is great. I can feel a bit more pressure towards the front, but the padding is sufficient enough so that I can use these for extended periods of time without any pain. The material, however, isn't particularly breathable, so it does get a little warm. The so-called smart controller was placed in a smart position. Oh. The controller is in a position where, depending on how you're plugged in, you can just sort of set it near your hand and reach for it when you need to make an adjustment, as opposed to a headset with controls directly on the ear cup, where you've got to go all the way to your head. I think I still prefer the on-ear controls though. If I'm hanging back in my chair or standing, the controller is less likely to sit on my desk and more likely to just hang out, which means I gotta go tracing along the cable for it, as well as bear the additional weight. Speaking of that cable, it's pretty thick. It starts out kind of stiff, but after working it a bit, it loosens up real good. I know what I said. And finally, the renders on their website aren't quite the same as the actual product, but you could probably tell based on the footage. For $50 US, it's not a bad deal in my opinion. For a little bit more, you can pick up something like Corsair's Void Pro headset, and while I think Corsair's option sounds a little better, sports real RGB, and the software is much more refined, the microphone on the wireless version, I don't have the wired one, didn't impress me nearly as much as this one did. If you're looking for a good sounding headset with a good sounding microphone and RGB around the ears isn't as huge a deal to you, you can't see it anyway, then go ahead and pick this thing up. It's an overall pleasant experience, and that bass vibration just might give you the heebie-jeebies. And so that's all I have to say about that. Like, dislike, comment, subscribe, share, leave me questions if you've got them. Thanks for watching. My name is Steven, and I am a little dim. Bye-bye. And as you may or may not know, Hebe is the I should have been prepared for that. And as you may or may not know, Hebe is the cup bearer for... I didn't want to make the clacking noise. There's an Asa case down there with glass on it, and I was tapping the glass with with another padded elastic suspended band for... Oh, that's not what I said. That rests on your head, sporting the Gamdias logo. Oh, that's the end of the sentence. Why am I still holding these? You've got a plastic housing, a metal headband for durability with another plaited. The left ear cup houses this unidirectional. The left ear cup houses this noodly unidirectional microphone that sounds a little something like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to read off the microphone. But it does pick up, oh, I'm supposed to have a keyboard. Ha, I forgot. I'm terrible. The left ear cup houses this noodly some additional microphone and speaker adjustment settings that are a little wacky, but oh, this is the other part I need to record. What? I didn't really think about how I wanted to do this part. I don't know if I wanted to B-roll over it, or if I wanted to put software recording over it, or I'm gonna, do I have OBS on here? It pays to be organized, and I obviously don't get paid. Where is OBS? Do I still have it? I hope I still have it. Fuck, I don't have it. Jesus, this is gonna waste so much hard drive space. Not because OBS takes a lot of space, but because recording in 4K takes up a lot of space, and I don't have a lot of space left. These still have a little bit of ambiguity.
This is not the best way for me to do this.